Rob Board. Prologue. What flocks of critics hover here today, as vultures wait on armies for their prey, all gaping for the carcass of a play. With croaking notes they bode some dire event, and follow dying poets by the scent. Ours gives himself for gone. You've watched your time, he fights this day unarmed, without his rhyme, and brings a tale which often has been told, as sad as Dido's and almost as old. His hero, whom you wits his bully call, bates of his mettle and scarce rants at all. He's somewhat lewd, but a well-meaning mind, weeps much, fights little, but is wondrous kind. In short, a pattern and companion fit for all the keeping Tonys of the pit. I could name more, a wife and mistress too, both, to be plain, too good for most of you. The wife well-natured and the mistress true. Now, poets, if your fame has been his care, allow him all the candour you can spare. A brave man scorns to quarrel once a day, like Hector's in at every petty fray. Let those find fault whose wit's so very small they've need to show that they can think at all. Errors like straws upon the surface flow. He who would search for pearls must dive below. Fops may have leave to level all they can, as pygmies would be glad to lop a man. Half-wits are fleas, so little and so light, we scarce could know they live, but that they bite. But, as the rich, when tired with daily feasts, for change become their next poor tenant's guests, drink hearty draughts of ale from plain brown bowls, and snatch the homely rasher from the coals. So you, retiring from much better cheer, for once may venture to do penance here. And since that plenteous autumn now is past, whose grapes and peaches have indulged your taste, take in good part from our poor poet's board such rivalled fruits as winter can afford. Scene: Alexandria. Act 1. The Temple of Isis. Enter Serapion, Myris, priests of Isis.
Portents and prodigies have grown so frequent that they have lost their name. Our fruitful Nile flowed ere the wonted season, with a torrent so unexpected and so wondrous fierce, that the wild deluge o'ertook the haste even of the hinds that watched it. Men and beasts were born above the tops of trees that grew on the utmost margin of the water-mark. Then with so swift an ebb the flood drove backward. It slipped from underneath the scaly herd. Here monstrous foci panted on the shore. Forsaken dolphins there with their broad tails lay lashing the departing waves. Hard by them, sea-horses, floundering in the slimy mud, tossed up their heads and dashed the ooze about them.
Enter Alexis behind them.
Avert these omens, heaven!
Last night, between the hours of 12 and 1, in a lone aisle of the temple while I walked, a whirlwind rose that with a violent blast shook all the dome. The doors around me clapped. The iron wicket that defends the vault, where the long race of Ptolemies is laid, burst open, and disclosed the mighty dead. From out each monument in order placed, an armed ghost starts up. The boy king last reared his inglorious head. A peal of groans then followed, and a lamentable voice cried, "Egypt is no more." My blood ran back, my shaking knees against each other knocked. On the cold pavement down I fell entranced, and so unfinished left the horrid scene.
Alexis, showing himself.
And dreamed you this, or did invent the story? To frighten our Egyptian boys withal, and train them up betimes in fear of priesthood.
My lord, I saw you not, nor meant my words should reach your ears. But what I uttered was most true.
A foolish dream, bred from the fumes of indigested feasts and holy luxury.
I know my duty. This goes no further.
'Tis not fit it should, nor would the times now bear it, were it true. All southern from yon hills the Roman camp hangs o'er us black and threatening, like a storm just breaking on our heads.
Our faint Egyptians pray for Antony, but in their servile hearts they own Octavius.
Why then does Antony dream out his hours, and tempts not fortune for a noble day, which might redeem what Actium lost?
He thinks 'tis past recovery.
Yet the foe seems not to press the siege.
Oh, there's the wonder. Maecenas and Agrippa, who can most with Caesar, are his foes. His wife Octavia, driven from his house, solicits her revenge. And Dolabella, who was once his friend, upon some private grudge now seeks his ruin. Yet still war seems on either side to sleep.
'Tis strange that Antony, for some days past, has not beheld the face of Cleopatra, but here in Isis' temple lives retired, and makes his heart a prey to black despair.
'Tis true, and we much fear he hopes by absence to cure his mind of love.
If he be vanquished, or make his peace, Egypt is doomed to be a Roman province, and our plenteous harvests must then redeem the scarceness of their soil. While Antony stood firm, our Alexandria rivalled proud Rome, Dominion's other seat, and Fortune striding like a vast Colossus could fix an equal foot of empire here.
Had I my wish, these tyrants of all nature, who lord it o'er mankind, would perish, each by the other's sword. But since our will is lamely followed by our power, we must depend on one, with him to rise or fall.
How stands the queen affected?
Oh, she dotes Serapion, on this vanquished man, and winds herself about his mighty ruins. Whom would she yet forsake, yet yield him up, this handed prey to his pursuers' hands? She might preserve us all, but 'tis in vain. This changes my designs, this blasts my counsels, and makes me use all means to keep him here, whom I could wish divided from her arms, far as the earth's deep centre. Well, you know the state of things. No more of your ill omens and black prognostics. Labour to confirm the people's hearts.
Enter Ventidius, talking aside with a gentleman of Antony's.
These Romans will o'erhear us. But who's that stranger? By his warlike port, his fierce demeanour, and erected look, he's of no vulgar note.
Oh, 'tis Ventidius, our emperor's great lieutenant in the east, who first showed Rome that Parthia would be conquered. When Antony returned from Syria last, he left this man to guard the Roman frontiers.
You seem to know him well.
Too well. I saw him at Sicilia first, when Cleopatra there met Antony. A mortal foe was to us and Egypt, but let me witness to the worth I hate. A braver Roman never drew a sword. Firm to his prince, but as a friend, not slave, he ne'er was of his pleasures, but presides o'er all his cooler hours and morning councils. In short, the plainness, fierceness, rugged virtue of an old true stamp Roman lives in him. His coming bodes I know not what of ill to our affairs. Withdraw to mark him better, and I'll acquaint you why I sought you here, and what's our present work.
They withdraw to a corner of the stage, and Ventidius, with the other, comes forward to the front.
Not see him, say you? I say I must, and will.
He has commanded, on pain of death, none should approach his presence.
I bring him news that will raise his drooping spirits, give him new life.
He sees not Cleopatra.
Would he had never seen her.
He eats not, drinks not, sleeps not, has no use of anything but thought. Or if he talks, 'tis to himself, and then 'tis perfect raving. Then he defies the world, and bids it pass. Sometimes he gnaws his lips, and curses loud the boy Octavius. Then he draws his mouth into a scornful smile, and cries, "Take all! The world's not worth my care."
Just his nature, virtue's his path, but sometimes 'tis too narrow for his vast soul, and then he starts out wide and bounds into a vice that bears him far from his first course and plunges him in ills. But when his danger makes him find his faults, quick to observe and full of sharp remorse, he censures eagerly his own misdeeds, judging himself with malice to himself, and not forgiving what as man he did, because his other parts are more than man. He must not thus be lost.
Alexis and the priests come forward.
You have your full instructions. Now advance, proclaim your orders loudly.
Romans, Egyptians, hear the Queen's command. Thus Cleopatra bids, let labour cease. To pomp and triumphs give this happy day, that gave the world a lord, 'tis Antony's. Live, Antony, and Cleopatra live. Be this the general voice sent up to heaven, and every public place repeat this echo.
Ventidius aside.
Fine pageantry.
Set out before your doors the images of all your sleeping fathers, with laurels crowned. With laurels wreathe your posts, and strew with flowers the pavement. Let the priests do present sacrifice. Pour out the wine, and call the gods to join with you in gladness.
Curse on the tongue that bids this general joy. Can they be friends of Antony, who revel when Antony's in danger? Hide for shame, you Romans, your great-grandsire's images, for fear their souls should animate their marbles, to blush at their degenerate progeny.
A love which knows no bounds to Antony would mark the day with honours, when all heaven laboured for him, when its propitious star stood wakeful in his orb to watch that hour and set his better influence. Her own birthday our queen neglected like a vulgar fate that passed obscurely by.
Would it had slept, divided far from his, till some remote and future age had called it out to ruin some other prince, not him.
Your emperor, though grown unkind, would be more gentle than to upbraid my queen for loving him too well.
Does the mute sacrifice upbraid the priest?